joining us for tonight's personal statement workshop. We're excited to have you here and to help you feel more confident and prepared as you work on one of the most important parts of your pharmacy school application, the personal statement. Just letting some more folks in here. Okay, awesome. My name is Danielle Stubbs. I am the Associate Director of Student Recruitment and Diversity at the American Association of Colleges of Pharmacy, and I will be moderating the session for today. Tonight, we're going to cover what admissions committees are really looking for in a personal statement, how to effectively tell your story, and common mistakes to avoid. I'm thrilled to be joined by two amazing guests from the Irma Lerma Rangel College of Pharmacy. We have Amanda Galvan, who is a licensed professional counselor and director of student success, who brings with her a wealth of experience in supporting students through the admissions process. And we are also joined by Mauricia Gallegos, a P3 student pharmacist, who will share her experience and her journey and tips that helped her stand out when she was writing her personal statement. This is an interactive session, so feel free to drop your questions in the chat as we go. We will have some time at the end for a bit of Q&A as well. But other than that, I will hand it over to Amanda to get started. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you so much, Danielle. We're very excited to be here with you today. So as we go to our next slide here, I probably should have tested that I'm able to get to our next slide. Thank you for that introduction. As Danielle stated, I am the Director of Student Success who happens to be a licensed professional counselor. I have over 14 years experience serving students in higher education, but I'm excited to share with you that for the past 6 years, my career has been solely dedicated to helping pharmacy students, not only as they decide that pharmacy is their career destiny, but as they get through the program and also helping them with gainful employment. So on to our next guest.
Hello, my name is Mauricia Gallegos, and I like to say howdy, I'm Mowdy. It's just a little nickname and goes with our tagline for Texas A&M. So I am one of the class of 2026 representatives from the Irma Lerma Rangel College of Pharmacy, and I am also a PharmD and MBA candidate. I previously got my Bachelor's of Science from Texas A&M University, Kingsville, where I double majored in chemistry and biomedical science, and I have 6 years of experience in the pharmacy setting.
So today's agenda, we are going to cover a lot. We're going to talk about understanding the personal statement and its purpose. We're hopefully going to help you get ready to craft your narrative and talk about the challenges you might face during the writing process. And then we're going to move on to talk about other ways that you will utilize your personal statement throughout your academic journey and beyond. And then, of course, we will not leave you without sharing some examples and answering some questions that you might have for myself or our pharmacy student who is excited to be with us here today. So I want to just take a moment to congratulate all of you who have already made a decision that pharmacy is the career path for you. So I want you to know no matter what pharmacy school you decide to apply and have your adventure on, I want you to get prepared for having intensive relationships with faculty, staff, and other students as you develop your professional identity. And if you so happen to come to our campus, we are very excited to receive you as you embark on this journey. Now, today's goal, again, we want to equip you with the knowledge and strategies to write a personal statement that effectively showcases your motivations, qualifications, and your suitability for pharmacy school. So, what is a personal statement? I think that's a good point to start here because a lot of the questions I saw that were proposed before we had our session, many of our participants may never have written a personal statement. So I want you to be aware that some applications may refer to this as a personal essay or a reflective essay. They use those terms interchangeably. They are all the same, okay? And so if they're asking you to write a personal essay or reflective essay, they are asking for a personal statement. So what is a personal statement? By definition, I want you to keep a simple definition in your mind. It is an essay focused on your career aspirations. It describes your clarifying moment leading up to your chosen program of study. And I want you just to keep this definition in mind because it will help you write that personal statement. So, as I mentioned, you know that the personal statement is something that you will definitely use for graduate school or professional school applications, such as pharmacy school, but you might not be aware of other ways this personal statement will help you throughout your journey. So, if you haven't thought about it yet, that document that you're preparing for graduate school or professional school applications, hold on to it. Because as you identify scholarships, sometimes these scholarships have a prompt that is very similar to a personal statement prompt. And so a lot of times you've already written a scholarship essay. It might be your starting point, or you might just use it as is. So I want to make sure to point that out to you in case you've never thought about how your personal statement follows you. Consider using it for scholarship applications if it applies to the prompt for that essay, for example. Networking. If you've heard of something called the elevator pitch or a 30-second commercial, that is pretty much you interacting with professionals as you're networking and your opportunity to explain your mission as you pursue this field. And so, a lot of times when you're looking for internships or you're just looking to build a network, your personal statement already has some ingredients that allow you to develop a 30-second commercial or an elevator pitch. Now, again, today that's not the focus, but I just want to remind you that if you've written a personal statement, you should be borrowing from that personal statement whenever you are networking and coming up with your own 30-second commercial, also known as that elevator pitch. And the last thing I want you to consider, which is really important, there is a common interview question, and that is, tell us about yourself. Whether you're applying for a pharmacy internship, full-time pharmacy position, or maybe you're getting ready for residency, fellowship opportunities in terms of post-graduation, I want you to know that this is a question that is always proposed. And a lot of times you have already started to answer that question with your personal statement. So, again, keep your personal statement handy even after you are accepted into pharmacy school. So that way you are using it in these different avenues that may allow you to have a good starting point if you've crafted an effective personal statement. All right, so now you know other ways you might use this personal statement. How do you get started writing? Now, I want you to think about your personal statement as crafting your narrative because you are telling your story. Now, when it comes to you telling your story, I want to really simplify your approach, okay? And so I have some ingredients for you that are going to help you feel ready to start on your very first draft. Now, this ingredients has three parts. Part one is called an attention grabber. Part two is your story. And part three, your calling. So, what do I mean by this? Let's take a look. Starting with your attention grabber. You want to avoid starting your personal statement in the usual generic way, which might read something along the lines of, my name is Amanda Galvan. I am a student at Texas A&M University interested in a career in pharmacy. Now, the reason you want to avoid starting that way is because these recruiters are constantly reading personal statements and they are really burnt out of reading statements that start with that tone. So, I want to show you a different way you might decide to start your personal statement, which is a way to captivate your reader and encourage them to continue reading. So, here is an example. My home has been a place for healing broken hearts, both literally and figuratively. My younger sister had two open heart operations before the age of 2. At this time, I want you to go to the chat. And if I were to ask you to guess what career or field might this student be interested in, what would your answer be? They haven't stated it yet, so I'm going to take a look at the chat here. Cardiology, cardiology, we see that quite a bit. And you are right. So it was very clear to some of you that that is where they were leading their reader. And this is a perfect example of how this student, they found a way to captivate their reader without starting in the very generic way that students typically start. So great job, those of you who got that right. This person was interested in becoming a cardiologist. Now, it's important to note that you do want to state your why. Why do you want to become a pharmacist? What have you done so far to cultivate this interest? So that information will definitely come out usually in the body of your personal statement. So for example, this student might have created a body that just had two paragraphs. One was focused on why they wanted to become a pharmacist. Second paragraph talked a little bit about the experiences that they have had so far that has prepared them. Maybe they talk about soft skills, for example, that they have developed if they haven't developed healthcare experience. So last but not least, after you have walked them through your why, some experiences that you want to share with them that ensure your readers that you are prepared to be a viable candidate for that field, then it's time to close. Now, your closing is just reiterating the things that you have mentioned. And your goal is really to make a connection with that program. So you might end by just reiterating your academic, career, or research interests as they relate to your career goal. But you don't have to touch upon all of these, okay? These are just some examples. Now let's actually look at some examples so you can see eventually what this personal statement product looks like. But before we get to those examples, I want to help you start generating some ideas. So we're just going to pause for a moment and I have a question for you. Who are you outside of the classroom? What do I mean by that? I want you to think about some of the extracurricular things you might participate in. For example, are you involved in any healthcare related internships or have you done shadowing? If not, maybe there were some volunteering experiences that you might talk about. They don't have to be healthcare related. Let's say you worked at the Boys and Girls Club or you put some time in there. You can definitely talk about your ability to manage behavior of those little ones and your cooperation, teamwork skills with some of the other volunteers. Maybe you're saying to yourself at this point, I haven't done much in terms of extracurricular or volunteering. Well, in that case, maybe you've read some thoughtful periodicals. That might be something that you bring up in your personal statement if you feel that you lack experience. And we talked about research experience. It's not required, but my undergraduates, if you have opportunity to volunteer to be a part of research, that is definitely something that makes you stand out. And then those of you who have had the opportunity to study abroad, if you haven't thought about bringing that into your personal statement, it will definitely be a way for you to tell your story of how you really have developed beyond the classroom. All right, so now it's time to show you what these final products might look like. So I'm not going to read this example in its entirety, but I want you to get a feel for how we're seeing some of the ingredients that we just walked through. So let's take a look at their introduction. This student starts off with saying, my cousin Toby died at age 29. He was diagnosed with sickle cell at birth. So he goes on to talk about how devastating it was to see his cousin suffer and eventually lose his life. Now, I need to pause here because a lot of times people might be inclined to talk about that the healthcare system did not do enough. There needs to be a balance with you identifying a need, but also being passionate about the field. Be careful not to put down other professionals in the field or the field itself. And you'll notice that he had that balance. He talked about the concerns, but then he ends with, today, doctors and scientists are discovering better ways to help patients with sickle cell disease, and I aspire to contribute to advancing the way we serve patients with this disease in hopes I can give someone more years and memories with a cousin, friend, or a child. So the passion was clearly there. He went on to talk about both of my parents are from Nigeria, and he went on to talk about why that was important because they really instilled the power of education. And so he talks about how important education is to him and his family. And then as we move on to the middle paragraphs here, he goes on to talk about what motivates him to be a part of the new discoveries in science, which again, it takes it back to his experience with his cousin. And even though he doesn't have research, he says, one day as a researcher, I will be able to utilize the knowledge acquired through my years of schooling to help not only patients who suffer from sickle cell disease, but I would love to expand my research to impact other deadly diseases. So the passion again is clearly here. He understands the impact that he might make in his field, and then he goes on to talk about some experiences that he has had as an undergrad. So you'll see here that he says, as an undergrad, majoring in biomedical science and a minor in chemistry, I have continuously proven my leadership ability, where he goes on to talk about being a part of Association for Pre-Health Professions, American Medical Student Association, where he also secured leadership positions for some of these organizations. So with this paragraph, he did a really great job of demonstrating how active he might be as a student in his professional community. So if you have had those experiences as an undergraduate, they are of great value to recruiters because they visualize you being an active student on their campus and contributing to the community. Now, I think this is a good moment to pause to reflect on the fact that some people today are making the mistake of using AI to write their personal statements. And I really want to discourage you from doing that, because there's no way that AI is going to be able to tell your story as we saw here. And not only are you looking at disclaimers where you will sign off that you did not use AI to write your personal statement, but I want to warn you, if you're using AI, it will come across a little generic versus when they're really feeling your personality and passion, when they can tell that you've written your own personal statement. So I think this one again was just a really good example where you might see a few grammatical errors, but the passion and the experience and the research that he did about that program was clearly there. So in closing, again, he just continues to talk about his academics and reiterating his passion for focusing on the research connected to blood diseases. So this was one example of a student, again, that did include those ingredients that we were looking at. He talked again about not only the passion, but some of what he has done to cultivate how he has prepared himself to hit the ground running as a pharmacy student. Now, this second example, it does not include extracurricular activities. And I know some of us are worried, well, I didn't do much with extracurricular. If that's the case, demonstrate your passion and that you've done research. So this one here, they are simply talking about their passion for the field. They talk about how interesting the pharmacy profession is and the possibilities for their future. So this tells the reader that they understand that there is more to pharmacy than just retail. There are so many other career paths. And this person did a really good job of just talking about that they have done their research and they are knowledgeable in various topics pertaining to healthcare. So moving on to their body, they say, my first inclination to become a pharmacist rose out of my concern for others. A significant part of my character is devoted to caring for other people and contributing to their well-being. Though I have not gained any work experience in the field, through observation and personal experience, I have learned that the health professions are dedicated to this same mission. So I think it's important to highlight that this person did not have experience, but they did an amazing job of, again, displaying the passion and the fact that they have done the research to understand what field they are entering, what it can do for society, and talking about some of the things that they have done, for example, to cultivate a strong foundation. So they talk about, for example, their biology classes, what they've learned about the human body. And so I want you to remember, even though you don't have exact pharmacy experience, your educational background, you might pick up from some of those enrichment moments that really inspired you to help you understand the impact you can make as a future pharmacist, which we read here in their closing. I plan to continue to challenge myself with a rigorous Doctor of Pharmacy program. And they mention the exact school, and in the future with the demanding pharmaceutical profession. So you saw again 2 examples, one of a student that did talk about their experiences undergrad. The second one just focused more on their passion and the research that they have done. So moving on, Mauricia has some examples of her own to share with you as well. Mauricia?
So, howdy, it's Maddie again. So I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about more of the perspective behind like what a rough draft might look like and how it can go on to develop a more refined draft. So I did some examples of things that I'm involved in. So an example of a rough draft item, if you click next, it says, I was elected to be class of 2026 representative my P1 year and have held this role for the past 3 years. And so this was actually one of the pitfalls that I fell into a lot of the time when writing about myself. This type of sentence can come off as more declarative. So it doesn't spark as much joy to just say, I was in this position and I held it. So an example of how it could go into a more refined draft, you can see on the right, says in student government, I serve as class of 2026 representative where I work with peers, faculty, and leadership to address student concerns. So you can see how it shifts from more declarative to more demonstrative sentence. And so while you might think that it's not good to have it in a rough draft, I think it's a really good starting point because that is one of my strengths, that position that I held. But when you're working and developing on the draft, sparking more joy within your essay will help you engage the reader more. Another example of a rough draft item would be when you're more reflective. So, for example, this was my personal mission. Once I graduate from pharmacy school, I plan to serve my patients in more than one capacity as a community leader, reliable scientist, and healthcare provider. So, these are all good things and things to think about when you're developing your rough draft. But once you get to a more refined draft, you shift from more reflective to connective. So, an example of this could be in the future, I plan to pursue my pharmacy career in informatics as it offers a unique opportunity to utilize my PharmD and MBA degrees to improve patient care and advance the profession. So you can see how I went from a more reflective mindset and what I want to do in the future to more connective to how I could utilize what I've learned throughout all my experiences to what I will do for work in the future.
So the reason we're here today also is to hear from Mauri and how her perspective was if she could take herself back to when she decided to pursue pharmacy school and she had to start on that first draft. So Mauricia, we have some questions for you when it comes to writing or crafting your narrative. Can you tell us what motivated you to apply to pharmacy school?
So I first got interested in pharmacy after being a part of this program called the Medical Explorers, where we got to hear through a ton of different medical professionals about what they do in their job, and just the role of pharmacist really spoke to me. So I researched it more and tried to get as involved as I could. So like for high school, I went to a health science academy where I could get a pharmacy technician certification. And then once I got into undergrad, I sought out this program called Aspire that is a part of my current pharmacy school that helps students apply and then eventually matriculate into the program. And so that's how I first got interested in pharmacy. But my interest in the field was really because of how broad the scope of a pharmacist could be. So it's not just community pharmacy, although we do see them everywhere. You also have the opportunity to be specialized and versatile. So there's so many different ways to make an impact. So you can specialize within a hospital, like to go with the cardio floor, or like for me, I'm interested in informatics. That's a little niche group of pharmacists there, but that's another way you can specialize. And even industry, a lot of people aren't aware that there are industry pharmacists out there too.
So thinking about everything that you described, especially some of your experience before arriving, which experiences did you choose to highlight in your personal statement and why?
So I chose to emphasize my community experience since I was working as a technician while I was in undergrad, as well as my extracurriculars. I try to be really involved to build those soft skills. And so I really focused on translating what I learned from those experiences to how it will help me in pharmacy school.
And do you remember how did you structure your narrative to engage the reader?
So for my story, I mostly focused on how I became interested in pharmacy at the beginning as kind of the attention grabber. And then I really focused in on what experiences I gained and, you know, providing more detail on each of those experiences. And then went on to talk about what I hope to accomplish through the pharmacy program. And to close it all up with the ending, I talked about how my goals aligned with that of the school's mission.
Thank you, Mauricia. And challenges faced. What specific challenges did you encounter when you were writing your personal statement?
So I did mention it a little earlier, but I do tend to be more declarative when I'm talking about things. That's just myself. I'm not used to humble bragging, so it was a difficult challenge to catch myself, be aware of when I was being too declarative, and see when I can be more demonstrative with like my answers to questions or just like in that essay, how I can demonstrate skills rather than just saying what I did. So showcasing those accomplishments can be hard, especially when you're like just going through it. Like it's tough enough like to get through it sometimes. But taking that time to reflect on it and write about it is really helpful for writing this personal statement and in the future. So, like right now, I'm going to go into P4 year. And so the next step after that is residency. So, having that practice of, going through those times and then reflecting back on what I learned and the skills I've gained from it has really helped me with my mindset going into P4 year now.
It sounds like your writing skills have also been enhanced through your personal statement development over the years. How did you seek and apply feedback? Do you recall that process?
So at that time, I was still an undergrad, so I did have access to a writing center. So I made sure to utilize just all the resources that are available. So the writing center, helpers there, mentors that I had through the Aspire program. And so that would could be like the facilitators of the program or like even alumni of the program too. I would reach out just to ask their perspective and help with maybe just reading through my essay, as well as my non-pharmacy family. So sometimes you might think, oh, I really want a pharmacist to read it. But just getting someone else to read it, like for me, I relied on my family members just to read for tone to see if it was coming off the way I wanted. So all those different resources can help you make a final product that you really like. And next, I wanted to add these two pictures here. These are just two common phases of writing a personal statement. So once you get all that feedback, you might feel like that picture on the left, like you're trying to take it all in and determine like, should I really make those changes or which ones will I accept and which ones will I choose to keep out? So that could take some time. So I would say make sure to give yourself enough time to take in all that feedback and think about how you want to implement it. And then after giving yourself time to think about all of it, you can be more empowered to go back in there and maybe add some new things once you start talking to other people who might be applying or what other people decided to mention that might spark some new ideas how you want to approach your essay. And so those are two just common phases that you'll go through when you're writing your essay. So give yourself some time to work through those phases.
So, utilizing the personal statement beyond pharmacy school, can you tell us in what ways has your personal statement helped you in applying to scholarships as a pharmacy student?
So I would say it helped a lot because it gave me a really good starting point on developing those personal statements. So my personal mission and sentiment is really the same that it was in my personal statement. I'm just really updating, what I was involved in, and also just needing to tailor maybe some details for that specific scholarship.
That makes a lot of sense, Mauricia. I can see how, how you cultivated yourself to be prepared to be a full-time pharmacist. You have a lot to talk about now versus when you were an undergraduate applying to pharmacy school. How has your personal statement helped you prepare for networking or interviews if it has?
So similar to the scholarship, it gives you a starting point. Like you already usually outline your highlights when you're thinking about what to include in the personal statement. So thinking back to like when you look at your personal statement and preparing for interviews or networking, you can go back to see, okay, like make sure to mention these key points, like these key involvements. And then also again, like with the scholarships, tailor it to that experience. So for example, if you're going for a community pharmacy experience or job, you might not mention tennis. Like, that's something I'm really involved in, my tennis volunteering, but it might not be as relevant to what they want to know, which would be like my community pharmacy experience. So things like that can really help you pick out what to mention in those experiences.
Thank you, Mauricia.
And then next, I also just wanted to leave y'all with some self-reflective exercises to help in that rough draft stage of developing your personal statement. So, starting off with what experiences are you most proud of? So, not necessarily what leadership positions did you hold, but which experiences did you really make an impact in and that you're really happy to talk about? And then next would be why blank pharmacy school? So, how would that pharmacy school align with your personal vision? So, like for me, I really wanted to come to a pharmacy school that would come back, allow me to go back and serve my community. So I really wanted to practice in South Texas. So I found a school that's in South Texas that can help me gain the skills that I need to go back and bring those skills to the community. And then lastly, what are some adjectives that describe my personality? I know a lot of y'all really wanted to know how to tie in your personality to your personal statement. And so just thinking about some adjectives that you want to demonstrate in your essay could be a good starting point so that you have it primed in your mind. This is the tone I want to give off or image I want to give off of myself when you're writing.
Thank you so much, Mauricia. I think this is a good starting point for us to just stop and reflect on the fact that all of you do have things to talk about. So if you're nervous with getting started with that personal statement, at this time, I want to point you to the chat. And in the chat, you're going to find some additional questions to help you. So please take a look at this personal statement guide. You'll find that it does have another example for you here. This example is it's not pharmacy, but it again gives you a different approach because I want you to take away from looking at these examples that there isn't a cookie cutter approach to writing a personal statement. It is about you telling your story. And after you read a few examples, you'll be inspired to tell your own unique story. So try to describe in 1,000 words why are you pursuing your field of study. Now, keep in mind that you want to address the prompt. So when you're applying to the pharmacy school, pay attention to the prompt itself. But if you don't have a prompt just yet and you want to start on a draft, this is a good prompt for you to start on. It gives you a more in detail definition of a personal statement. But I really want you to focus on these questions because they support the questions Mauricia just introduced us to. If you are answering these questions, you are writing an effective personal statement. So, who am I? Remember, consider starting with your clarifying moment. What factors or experiences led you to choose this field of study? You might want to go into who do I want to be, showing that you have really researched the field and you understand what that field entails, what kind of contribution do I want to make. So be sure to touch upon how does your career aspirations demonstrate a commitment to improving the lives of others. This is a very important part of this document because you need to definitely take some time to talk about not only is what that degree is going to do for you, but how you're going to contribute to patient care, society. And so this question really helps you reflect on that. And then why does it make sense to study at that particular university, as Marisa pointed out for us? So, rule of thumb typically it's single space, 12 point, Times New Roman font, one page. Typically, one page is enough. So, to see more examples, please visit this link here on the bottom. And I encourage you to check out this webpage. You will find more examples. So, if you go to chapter 4, specifically in chapter 4, this is where I pulled one of the pharmacy examples that we reviewed today. So if you want to look at that more slowly, I know I went through it pretty fast, you will find a pharmacy student example, but you'll find other examples. Remember, the idea is to read these to gain inspiration. You should definitely be creating your own personal statement just by reading these and understanding what that final product should entail.
And finally, I want to leave y'all with a little quote, ending quote. So strive not to be a success, but rather to be of value, from Albert Einstein. So I say this because success is a really subjective metric, but you can always find ways to create value. So you might be hesitating maybe to apply to pharmacy school because you don't have like XYZ experience. I know personally, my friend had a ton of pharmacy experience, but felt kind of insecure about not being super involved in clubs or making the best grades. But when schools are looking at you holistically, there's a lot of valuable qualities that you can display in other types of involvement, as Ms. Galvan mentioned earlier in the presentation. And also that pharmacy is such a broad field. There's so many ways to create value. And so one science thing I'll leave with you with is don't be the limiting factor of yourself. So there's no set image of a typical pharmacist. So like me, I went straight through school, whereas my friend had like 15 years of pharmacy experience before coming into it. So you can start just by taking micro steps. So you already made one here by coming to this presentation. So you're already on your way to applying to pharmacy school and your pharmacy journey. And so thank you so much for having me in this first steps. Now I think it's time for questions.
So at this time, we are open to any questions. We hope that we have answered some of the questions you had in mind when you decided to be with us today. And we hope that you walk away from this presentation feeling prepared and inspired. Remember, writing your narrative will take time and it will call for you to seek feedback. So do not hold it off. Just start writing, and you are one step closer to your final draft. So I hope today, again, you feel the confidence needed to write your first draft. Questions from the audience, and I will peek into the chat.
Thank you both so much. Yes, so if you have questions, please put them in the chat. We do have some that were submitted ahead of time, but I want to see if there's any burning questions that come up, and it looks like there are a few here. Let's see. If we did an experience that defined who we wanted to be in life, is that good to be a conversation starter, or do we put more into to get them interested? I'm not sure. I'm getting that whole question there if you want to put that in again.
So
But I don't know if,
it
go
sounds like
ahead.
the question might have been about, just the introduction.
Mhm.
Keep in mind that that is a suggestion to come up with an attention grabber. If you're struggling and you don't feel like your flow is there, you might start off a general way of just, talking about why that profession interests you. Do not feel that you have to start off with an attention grabber, if that answers your question.
If we're applying through FarmCast, should our personal statement not be school specific?
That is another excellent question. I would definitely keep, if you're looking at several schools, I would keep it generic. Mauricia, do you want to tackle that question as well and how you approached your personal statement in FarmCast?
So I personally applied just to one. So, but I knew there were specific um like supplemental materials, I believe, when I was applying. So that's where I got more specific with the program and how I can see it being tailored towards specific programs. But if there is just like a general personal statement that goes to all of them, I would keep it more general just to maybe interest in pharmacy school. And then yeah, look into if they have like the supplemental application.
And I'll just add there that exactly keep it general, but there are some schools that will have that supplemental that will ask a very specific question. So you might even be tasked with writing two personal statements, one that's more general and then one that's pretty specific. But then also in the admissions process, some will have like a writing sample that you have to submit maybe ahead of your interview or even write it during your interview. So it's still good to prepare those personal statements that are specific to those schools for when you get to that stage where you do need it. In terms of a hook, is it bad to put humor in it?
Ooh, that's an excellent question. So be cautious. We don't know who our readers are. And as we know, this is a subjective document. And so every person's going to react a little bit differently. I would steer away from humor because of that reason, because it's subjective and it may not come across as professional. But remember, everyone's narrative is unique and it is important for you to get feedback. So if you feel that that line of humor is adding your personality, I would encourage you get feedback from your writing center because they will be honest with you if it is really taking away from the professionalism and the tone. But I have seen students add humor and it come across as an effective and professional. So I would say you just have to be very cautious and seek feedback if you decide to do that, because it does add some personality. So I can understand why you're considering adding humor. So good luck to you for reaching out to someone to get their perspective on if it's professional or it's steering you away from professionalism.
I graduated college earning a biochemistry degree in 2019, and the last prerequisites I needed to apply to pharmacy school were online. With that, I don't have the connection with science professors to ask for a letter of recommendation. How will that affect my application?
That's an excellent question. And that sometimes worries me for students because depending on which program you're entering, some programs they're requiring you to get a letter of recommendation from a pharmacist. And I know sometimes that's a big task to ask someone who has never served in a healthcare setting. So talk to your admission recruiters. Sometimes they will give you ideas of other avenues. For example, if you communicate with them and you let them know that it is impossible for you to get a letter maybe from a faculty because it's been some time since you've been a student or from a pharmacist, they might give you some alternative ideas, such as someone within your community that has seen you volunteering, an instructor. They would possibly still accept a letter with the understanding that you're non traditional and you've been out of the system for some time. So please do talk to your recruiters and mission coordinators. They will help you troubleshoot if you're concerned about those letters of recommendation.
It's great advice. Yeah, I feel like a lot of folks don't know that you can reach out to the admissions folks, and they're more than happy to talk with you one-on-one to answer your questions. Um, so if we are only applying to one program on FarmCast, should we still steer away from listing that specific program in the personal statement?
I say go for it. List that specific program. If you are truly, genuinely excited and passionate and you are aligned with that program and mission, that is going to strengthen your personal statement. So keep that in mind. I'm kind of giving you a tip here. If you want to check out their website, learn about their mission statement, it is going to be very powerful if you bring that into your personal statement. So I say that gives you an opportunity to do so. Mauricia, would you say that that was something that you did since you did just apply to one school? Can I ask you that question?
For sure. I did a lot of background research on the mission and values of the school. A lot of businesses and colleges of pharmacy will have like a mission and a revision statement on their website. And so referring to that and seeing how your values align with that is a good starting point.
And I got one question in the Q&A. Will we have access to the Zoom recording after the session ends? Absolutely. We'll be putting it on the Pharmacies Right from a YouTube, but I'll also email it out to all of the attendees. Any more questions before I jump to the pre-submitted questions? Is it recommended to use work experience that are not related to pharmacy?
Yes, definitely yes. I'm glad you asked that question because a lot of times I find that people, they might see experiences that they've had in work environments as not relevant. And you need to know that any work experience that you have encountered so far in your life is relevant. There's something known as transferable skills. And you're able to talk about the fact that, for example, you have been relied upon in your work setting. You have been somebody who's punctual, a team player, attention to detail. You can get very creative with how you talk about the skill set that you're bringing into pharmacy school because maybe you've worked in retail, not necessarily in pharmacy. Maybe you've worked in Walmart or McDonald's or a restaurant. That is of great value to recruiters because, again, you have developed some skills before you arrived here. And I want you to know that those skills are of value. So while you might be showcasing those skills in your personal statement, remind yourself as you get ready to pursue pharmacy internships once you arrive in pharmacy school, those skills are of great value to recruiters. So thank you for asking about that. And I'm excited for you to write your personal statement since you have work experience to talk about.
Great. I'm going to jump to some of our pre-submitted questions because I think there's some really good ones in there as well. What are some things to avoid and leave out of the personal statement?
So that is a really good one. Typically, one mistake I see people make is they will tell their life story. I was born and raised in Corpus Christi, Texas. I later moved to Kingsville, Texas. You are not taking the right approach if you're telling them your entire life story. Remember, your goal is to talk about why pharmacy, what have you done to cultivate yourself in terms of the experiences that have prepared you to hit the ground running, not only as a pharmacist, but as a student. So you might want to talk about some of the academic experiences coupled with work experience. Try to steer away from adding too much of your personal life unless you're using it to engage your readers and you're finding that connection leading into the trajectory that brought you to apply to pharmacy school.
Would it be helpful to include that I'm hoping to join a community service organization, specifically a sorority for my university, to broaden my experiences?
So I think that one goes to Mauricia's point of demonstrating and declaring. So you are declaring that you're going to be doing this at some point in the future. It's not going to be as strong as if you demonstrate things that you have already done. So while it's okay to mention that, it goes to Mauricia's point where you are declaring, and I want you to look more to the things that you have already done that demonstrates that you are, again, a good team player or you're involved in your academic community. If you don't have those things to talk about, then it will serve you to mention that you do have plans to partake in those sorts of activities. But warning, I'd rather you demonstrate, as Mauricia pointed out.
And I think this one is kind of along the same vein. If you're thinking about joining programs after you submitted the application to FarmCast, do we mention those or leave them out?
So that is something that would be a strategy in a sense. the readers, it shouldn't bother them that you are seeking to apply to a pharmacy profession and that you are shopping around. You're kind of applying to different universities because you are also a customer and you might be deciding on the best program for you. So it is okay to mention that. However, recruiters will get more excited about students that have their university or institution as plan A. But it will not hurt you if you just let the readers know that you're still making a decision, but they are, one of your top choices.
Great. How important is the personal statement in the application process compared to other components of the application?
So personal statement will always be required. And that question, I would say it's going to depend on what program you're applying to. So I would say that question is very specific to the program itself. With some changes that have been happening now that AI is a part of society, there might be programs that it's not carrying as much weight as it did at the past. I know that's a conversation we're having right now at my institution. So I apologize that I'm not 100% clear on every campus, but it is still required for all professional school applications.
Yeah. During the interview, do I need to repeat the personal statement, or is that something that would already have been read by the interviewer?
So your personal statement, don't assume that your reviewers have it in the forefront of their mind. Yes, they might have read it at some point, but chances are they forgot everything you said. So do expect to reiterate and talk about some of the things that you do have in your personal statement. And as was mentioned, be prepared for the fact that they might ask you to write in real time something similar to a personal statement. I know that is a component of our interview process. We do have a writing station. And so that is compared. They do compare that writing to what you submitted in FarmCast.
Great. Can a personal statement be too long or too short, and how to kind of tell which one it's teetering towards?
I would say steer towards a shorter version of your personal statement. Keep in mind that these recruiters, they're very busy and they're reading hundreds of these documents. They prefer short and concise. However, read the instructions. Some prompts may call for a longer statement. Based on my experience, most programs will call for 1 page and they do not want you to go beyond 2 pages. They might restrict you to 2 pages. So when you're writing your draft, do not aim for length. I would aim for quality over quantity and try to stick to 1 page.
What makes the personal statement different from other documents like your resume or your elevator pitch? How formal should your personal statement be?
So your personal statement is a version of your elevator pitch, I would say, but it is a lot more detailed. When you're giving your elevator pitch, your resume, these are really chunked versions of what they read in your personal statement. So, for example, a resume does not include typically complete sentences. There might be bullets with just some duties and tasks that you've completed or accomplishments, while a personal statement is an essay that allows you to really showcase your personality along with your writing skills. And it allows the recruiters to see you beyond your letter grades and your transcript. And it gives them a feel for who you are as a person and the passion that you have for entering the field of pharmacy. That's not so easy to do with your resume. I would say with your elevator pitch, that is your mission. And that's why you'll refer to your personal statement because you pull bits and pieces to consider taking at conferences when you're eager to network with people in the pharmacy profession who may ask you about your career trajectory or plans after graduation.
You add to like for the resume, usually it's like for the bullet points, it has like the action, like soft skill that you want to highlight, like collaborated with or communicated, managed this activity. So you might see that more in like a resume, whereas a personal statement is like instead of explicitly saying like I collaborated with these people, you might demonstrate like how you foster community or something like that without explicitly saying it.
How far in advance did you start writing your personal statement?
For me, it was, I would say months because I wanted to give myself enough time to, again, go through that cycle. So take in the feedback, implement it, rethink how I maybe wanted to approach it, maybe differently, and give myself some time away from it so that I didn't have to just look at it every day. But that was me. It'll be subjective depending on, how much time you have or like how busy your schedule is too. So I will say plan ahead if you can to start working on it.
Awesome. I think we have time for one more question. So, what attributes distinguish an excellent personal statement from just a good or even a mediocre one?
I would say definitely refer to the personal statement guide. And as you saw in that section where it says an effective personal statement, we'll talk about, it gave you some pointers there. If you're sticking to those and you're really just pausing to reflect on the things that you have done, either as a student, as a worker, as a researcher, as a volunteer, you are definitely demonstrating to your readers that you have built the skills necessary and the foundation that's going to allow you to be a coachable student and offer some of those skills to your environment immediately. So please do rely on that personal statement guide because that little section there, if you feel like you've hit all of those questions, you have written an effective personal statement that will make an impact with your readers.
Do either of you have any last minute tips or bits of advice?
So I would say, as mentioned, don't hold off your writing. I'm glad that Mauricia shared with you that she started well in advance. So if you can, when things are, the sense of urgency is not really high, meaning you are not going to submit your application within weeks, you're going to find that writer's block is not as intense. If you are having to submit a personal statement, let's say within 3 weeks, writer's block does kick in and it really does impact your flow and the ideas that you develop. So the sooner that you can start working on your draft, the better. And two, know that your first draft is not going to be perfect. So give yourself time to allow yourself to see what comes out on paper, sleep on it, revisit it, get some feedback, and possibly after your fourth or fifth draft, you'll feel more solid and confident that you have an effective document ready to share. So time is of the essence. I hope that today you feel prepared to work on that first draft. Maudie, any additional comments or words of encouragement?
I would just say get started as soon as you can. We'll see. The more time, the better, especially like when you're getting feedback from people, because you don't know their timeline either when they'll be available all the time. So you might need it at a certain time, but if you're really crunch for time, that might be difficult to get in back by the time that you need it. So I'll just say good luck. And uh yeah, I'm excited for y'all to start applying. Just keep going. I know sometimes it can be a lot of work, especially like whenever you have like your jobs or schools that's taking a lot of your time. But starting early can really help curb some of that burden that puts on your plate, writing and fleshing out that statement.
And then one
Absolutely.
final comment inspired by Maori. It is okay to reject some people's feedback. I need to tell you that before I leave you. Not everyone's feedback is helpful. And so I leave you with that comment. Be prepared to reject some feedback as you work on your final drafts.
Yeah. Especially if you're getting feedback from a lot of people. It can be hard to,
Me, some I've had like just perspective differences, or like maybe if they're not in the field, sometimes they have a perspective like, well, this is what I see. So it might be like that kind of feedback where you're like, well, that doesn't really relate to pharmacy, that kind of feedback. For example, like my brother is an engineer. So he's like, well, in my engineering scope, like I see it this certain way. So maybe you might want to do it this way. But then I have to remember, well, this is pharmacy, so it might be a little different. So I won't necessarily accept all their feedback, but do consider what they have to say.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both so much for this awesome workshop and answering all of those questions. Thank you to our attendees for coming. We hope that this session provided you with some valuable insights to help you crafting a really compelling personal statement. If you miss any part of the workshop or you want to just rewatch it, I will be sending a link out afterwards via email, and it'll also be up on our YouTube page after. And if you want to explore more about pharmacy careers and admissions, please visit pharmacyforme.org for helpful tools, resources, and insights to help guide you on your pharmacy journey. We have one more really great workshop coming up next week. That's April 21st at 7 p.m. Eastern, titled Certified for Success, the Role of Board Certification in Pharmacy. And we'll have a really great panel of speakers. So thank you again to Amanda and Mauricia, and I hope you all have a great rest of your evening.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye,
Thank you
everyone.
for having us.